Once in a Lifetime, Chapter 9. 2 years? Girl, please. You're not an old hag yet, Madeline hollered. She lowered her tone when she saw people at the table next to us staring at her with amused looks on their faces. Your own brother is seriously involved with a woman 5 years older than him. Gary is very mature for a man his age, I shot back. How do you know that Ronald is not very mature for his age? I don't know if he is or not, but his age is not the only issue. He's also engaged, I said. He got his work cut out for him because she's very high maintenance. She's not even 30 and already owns a couple of successful beauty supply stores and has even won a couple of beauty pageants, Odette said with a wistful look on her face. Ronald is crazy about her. Really, Odette? How do you know so much about Ronald's fiancée? Do you know her? I asked. I couldn't believe we were discussing people I just met yesterday, but the subject was so intriguing to me I wanted to discuss it some more. Judith had told me enough to gain my sympathy, but I wondered what she hadn't told me. Varna was engaged to a beautiful and successful woman, and that was a good thing for him. But there was no telling what she was really like. And despite his medical condition, he could have been the boyfriend from hell for all I knew. And maybe his fiancée was staying with him out of pity or fear. However, something told me that wasn't the case. I scolded myself for letting my thoughts run in such a negative direction. I had always given people the benefit of the doubt until they gave me a reason not to. Odette rolled her eyes and gave me an amused look. Yes, I've met Ronald's fiancée. When he nods off during one of her visits, she hangs around a few minutes longer and chats with me. Nurses are the new bartenders and hairdressers. People like to share their businesses with us. Amen, Madeline agreed. I have an aunt who stopped going to her therapist when the advice she got from the lady who does her hair helped her work through her problems quicker and for a lot less money. She narrowed her eyes and whispered, I thought you medical people weren't allowed to reveal your patient's personal information. Isn't there some kind of rule in place like there is with priests and lawyers? Odette snickered. I haven't disclosed anything about Ronald or any of my patients that's not already public knowledge. His fiancée is at the hospital even more than his sister. He talks about her all the time. Every time visits or calls, it lifts his spirits, but it's not doing much to help his overall health. He's a very sick man. Although I had only been in Ronald's presence for a few moments, I cared about his well-being, especially when I recalled how Judith had gone to pieces in front of me yesterday. Judith thinks his situation is bleak. What do you think? I asked Odette. She looked keenly at me and inhaled with her mouth open. When somebody needs a new kidney, that's as bleak as it gets. Otherwise, he will die, she said flatly. Hearing that prognosis coming from Judith was one thing. Having it confirmed by someone with a medical background was even more disheartening. I should have steered the conversation in a more pleasant direction, but I was too curious to stop now. Besides, Odette didn't seem to mind answering my questions. From a professional standpoint, if you don't mind sharing, what kind of timeline are we talking about? A few months? A year? Her eyelids fluttered and she gave me a rueful look. I hate to say this, but if he doesn't get a new kidney in the next 6 months, he's probably not going to live to see next Christmas, she grimly predicted. One day when his sister came to visit, I overheard him telling her he wanted to update his will and pay off all of his bills ASAP. Odette let out a mournful sigh and shook her head. I feel so sorry for that poor woman. He's her only sibling. You and she already hit it off. Really hit it off, right? Yes, we did. I really like her and wouldn't mind getting to know her better. It was so thoughtful of her to bring my passport to me. We had a really nice long chat at her apartment yesterday afternoon. I shared one of the interesting things Judith had told me. It seemed like my visit did her a lot of good. I didn't want to tell them about her tearful breakdown. If I thought it was an odd way for a woman to behave with a virtual stranger, I knew they would too. The last thing I wanted was for them to try and discourage me from getting too close too soon. Maybe I can help keep her brother's spirits up. I hope he's well enough to bring him come home soon. I really like to know him better. Do you think it's a good idea to get close to somebody who might not be around much longer? Madeline asked. Odette's jaw dropped. What's the matter with you, Madeline? That's such an insensitive thing for you to say, she scolded. Each day is important, no matter how many more we have left. Madeline gave me an apologetic look. I know, and I'm sorry for making such a thoughtless question asking. V, do you want me to go with you the next time you visit Judith? I would like to meet her and Ronald myself. Maybe after I get to know them better. Judith told me she didn't like having company too often. So bringing someone with me too soon is probably not a good idea, I replied. True, but if I had their problems, I want as much support as possible, Odette said. I would too, I admitted. We finished our coffee and discussed work and a few other subjects before we left. When I got back to my apartment, I returned a few phone calls and checked my messages before I shoved a frozen TV dinner into the oven. Judith called me up 4 hours later. I was glad to hear that Ronald was no worse and that she was in a much better mood. It was a brief conversation, and I didn't think to ask when I could retrieve my umbrella until we had ended the conversation. I didn't want to wait too late to call her back, so I called right away. Another woman answered in a gruff tone, and it startled me. Yes, may I speak to Judith? I stammered. She's not available at the moment, the woman said curtly. Who's calling? I'm Vanessa, Judith's friend, as an afterthought, I added, and Ronald's. Oh, I'm Jan, his fiance. I couldn't understand why she thought it was necessary to put so much emphasis on who she was to Ronald. Have I met you before? No, I just met Judith and Ronald yesterday. I don't know if they'd mentioned me, but my name is Vanessa Hayes. They haven't, she said sharply. Look, this is not a good time. Can you call back some other time? Of course. I hung up immediately and called Odette. She didn't answer, so I tried Madeline's number. She answered right away. I said I just had an odd conversation. Oh? Does it have anything to do with your passport and that woman and her sick brother? Well, yes. I talked to Judith a little while ago, and I was pleased to hear that her brother is doing okay for now. Anyway, I left my umbrella at her place yesterday, and I wanted to find out when I could go pick it up. Ronald's fiance answered. So, what's so odd about that? She was cold the minute she answered the phone, but she sounded downright irritated when I told her I was Ronald's friend. In the first place, you saw Ronald for a split second. Only one time, maybe you can call Judith a friend, but to say that he's your friend to his fiancée like that sounds a little too bold. Do you really think so? Maybe that's not the right word. But put yourself in that woman's place. She's probably as stressed out as Judith is because of what's going on with Ronald. The last thing she needs to worry about is a woman never met, referring to herself as her fiance's friend. I see what you mean. It's no big deal, so I am not going to worry about it. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I hung up and started cooking the spaghetti I planned to have for dinner. After I eaten, I washed my hair and checked to see what was on TV. 10 minutes into a rerun of Dr. Phil, my cell phone rang. It was Judith. I was glad I hadn't turned it off and that it was within reach, so I didn't have to get up. Vanessa, I apologize for calling so late, but I wanted to remind you about your umbrella. I didn't think about it until a few minutes ago. I realized that right after we hung up, so I called right back. Did Jan tell you I called? She didn't mention it. Okay, I had more than one umbrella, so there was no rush for me to come get it. That's fine. I hope we can get together again soon. I don't want to spend all of my free time at the hospital or moping around the house. Maybe we can have dinner or check out a movie one day next week. I'd like that. I'm cooking a huge meal for Thanksgiving. My parents and one of my coworkers and her husband will be joining me. I'm sure they'll all love to meet you. Thank you so much, but I'll be eating dinner with Jan and some of her relatives. I'm hoping that they will release Ronald in time so he can be there too. Before all this started, the two of them were inseparable. He's had a couple of other serious relationships, but they were not nearly as important as this one. Jan is his world. I'm glad to hear that, I mumbled. Let's talk again in a couple of days. We can decide then about dinner and a movie. I scolded myself for saying what I said about Jan to Madeline. If somebody as sweet and likable as Judith thought so much of her, and if she was Ronald's world, she had to be something special. If Judith and I were going to become close friends, I hoped that Jan and I could become friends too. I read somewhere that the Duchess of Windsor once said, "A woman can never be too rich or too thin." I think she should have also said, "And a woman can never have too many friends." Anna Wong was one of my best friends, and her opinions were important to me. That was why I called her after my conversation with Judith and told her everything that had transpired since yesterday. I'm glad you were able to comfort Judith, but be careful. What's there to be careful about? V, all I'm saying is don't get too emotionally involved too soon. You don't want Judith to become too dependent on you. It could cause all kinds of problems, Anna Wong warned. Remember that temp who got so attached to you last year because you consoled her when her husband ran off with another woman? I'll never forget her, I replied with a groan. I still shudder when I think about how, even after her assignment ended, she still called me every hour on the hour every day and showed up unannounced. But if her husband hadn't taken her back when he did, you could have had a stalker situation on your hands. Psst, you are going way overboard. That was a totally different situation. All I'm doing is let Judith cry on my shoulder. I don't see how can that lead to any problems. All you did for that tramp was let her cry on your shoulder too. The next thing I knew, she was carrying on as if you were her own personal therapist. I leaned back in my seat and listened as Anna rambled on with warnings and advice for 5 minutes. Even though her voice was thick with exhaustion, she paused for a few seconds and started up again. She finally concluded with, "Promise me you'll be careful, V?" I promise. Like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Bye. Bye bye.